Hey guys, this is Gaijin Hunter, and thanks to a review copy provided by Capcom, I was able to review play the entirety of Monster Hunter Wilds. I want to give you my impressions, but without any spoilers, so I'll only be showing unedited random gameplay from the initial area of the game, and this will be more of a listening experience than a visual one. Feel free to background this video as you go about whatever you're doing. This also assumes that you're not new to Monster Hunter, and you already know about the different features that Wilds has to offer. I'll try to give the pros and cons of each topic together, that way you don't hear me gushing for the majority, only to back in whatever shortcomings I felt the game had in its current state. Playtime. It took me roughly 11 hours to get through low rank and an additional 14 to get through high rank. This is on par for all the games in the series, honestly. Monster Hunter is a game about replayability, so this was fine for me, and the amount of needless fat has been trimmed so much that these were some really high octane 25 hours or so with no deviation from myself when it comes to key quests or messing around with more than 2 weapons, the sword and shield and the dual blades. I don't know how much mileage normal people get from base games if they only play one weapon, but what I can say before I get to the topic is that the way they redid the skill system is fantastic, and the final list of weapons are all very well balanced, so I could easily see you wanting to simply make one of each of your favorite weapon, especially considering that they're back to unique designs for every variation, and some of them are nice. If you're coming in from a full-on expansion release like Iceborne or Sunbreak, you'll probably find the content super refined but lower in volume, sort of like how fancy steaks are served at high-end restaurants. They'll continue to add monsters as the base game goes on in free updates, and I assume unlocking new tiers of weapon upgrades and such, but don't expect the roster to change dramatically. Base games are where they lay the foundation so that they can go crazy later with a master rank expansion. Still, I feel the quality of what is there makes it worth playing the game now, and the experience of enjoying new updates along with the community is a fabulous one that I wouldn't want to miss unless time and money makes it hard. In the end, I feel the roster is smaller than even I expected, so that disappointed me a little bit, and I hope Capcom expands the roster faster sooner than later post-launch. Difficulty. We can't talk about the playtime without talking about difficulty. It's both true to say that Monster Hunter as a game is progressively easier the more experience you have in the series, but it's also true to say that Monster Hunter Wilds is probably the easiest entry in the series at the same time. Low rank hunts were all clocking in about 4 to 5 minutes for me, high rank about 6 to 10, and the endgame hunts is where I finally saw some going over 10 minutes to and upwards about 14. Every time you get knocked down, it's just a button press to get away and heal, and I think they could consider making the auto dodge ability of the Sacred a little limited to like just 1 or 2 times. That way there is risk to using it, because at this point it's like having unlimited wirefall from Sunbreak. They did remove a lot of friction that I know a lot of players liked in order to make the game more approachable, and the series has been going this direction for a while now, so I find it kind of pointless to talk about whether you like that approach or not. But it certainly does mean that more people will get into the game and stay with it, so in the end it'll be good for longevity of the franchise. But that also affected how much I cared about one of the cooler new features, which is pop-up camps. To be blunt, I ended up not using them at all. Not only was there low risk of carding in the game, but the Sacred is so fast and so good at autopilot that I would just hold circle to call it in auto mode, and then I would stand up and stretch, get a sip of water, and just let it shuttle me to the monsters. And that never took much time because the Sacred is fast and has really good auto pathfinding. Pop-up camps I think were meant to shine more in multiplayer, where you'll want to get back into the action as fast as you can in the event of a cart. But they were broken by monsters so often for me that I didn't care to repair or even engage with the system. Sacred kinda just nullified the niftiness of the mechanic for me. Progression. One thing that pleasantly surprised me is how fast you unlock each of the areas in the game. The idea seems to be less that one area houses harder monsters than the other, but that they all contain early, mid, and end game monsters. I really love this approach, and it made the game feel like it really opened up fast. I could have easily blown 100 hours doing different stuff if I wasn't focused on just the story. One of the reasons why I critical pathed the game was because I want to spend my majority on a new save when the game launches so I can enjoy it in multiplayer with my daughter. I only did like a few hunts in one area and already they were ushering me onto the next. But later on you'll come back to previous areas and there's new progression. The flow was sublime, and this is the best paced Monster Hunter game to date in my opinion. They also do a really good job of slowly unlocking features as you play through low rank. Low rank is very much treated as the extended tutorial for the game, so when you roll credits, assume that it's just the intro credits to the game. High rank is not to be considered endgame content, it is the actual continuation of the game, and there is a clear spot where the game then transitions into endgame. Without spoiling anything, it is hard, but there is a particular decision at the end of the game that is not going to sit well for a lot of players. It seems all but obvious to me that they wanted to keep some stuff in holding for post-launch updates that connect to the larger experience. I personally don't like the decision, but it'll be solved with just a little bit of time. Hopefully. I love what they did with investigations. Basically, when you look at the map, you can take any of the current monsters there and make an official quest out of it, being a survey quest that you'll start right away, or saving it as an investigation to do several times at a later time. There's a power rating and thus rewards will differ, so you can pick and choose like going out grocery shopping. This does though have the side effect of making rare items like gems almost meaningless, since you can always just choose harder investigations that have a guaranteed gem as a reward, but it's still better than what they did in Iceborne, since at the end of the day you're still having to hunt for it. It's not like you're just trading points for the item. Like it or not, but the quality of life seems here to stay, and while it feels kinda like cheating at times, it does mean players will hit less walls less often, for better or worse. Story. I'll be honest with you, for me, Monster Hunter is almost exclusively about having a compelling premise and environment for the game to take place in, and not about actual storytelling. Some parts of the story made me roll my eyes, but overall, it didn't drag at all like I felt it did in World Iceborne, and I think it did a good job of stitching together the elements of the game. Vocal performances were also great. Like every Monster Hunter game, I always feel there's potential to dive deeper into the characters that Capcom simply fails to do or often even attempt, with Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate being one of the rare exceptions. Nothing is really different this time. There's memorable locations set up and the characters are great, but the story itself will be like whatever. Some will love it, some will like it, some won't, and some will be indifferent about it like myself. Overall though, the journey and just the overall feeling of the game and the whole setup is really good. My initial concerns. First, let's cover my original concerns about the game from previews and the demo. First, the idea of a pack monster is there, and it's much easier to deal with than I thought it would be. And honestly, it only came up a few times in the natural progression of the game, so it felt kind of like a special event. This allowed me to really appreciate the mechanic, and it felt organic and not something gimmicky. If you're like me and you don't like to have a huge amount of chaos in your hunts, it's not something that you really need to interact with a lot, and there's tons of ways to handle it. So I find this to be a very positive feature for the game that I hope they expand on. I hope in the eventual expansion that they actually add more scripted pack monster events. The second concern I had was how fast the weather changes in the demo really occurred, and that added to the chaos that I wanted to get away from. And I was shocked to see how well reserved Capcom was about the pacing in this game. The different states of each area start out very static. Like you'll see the first area in one way and it'll stay that way until a big story beat later, and then it'll progress to the next state. Even after hours in endgame, it never felt like some chaotic gamey system, but rather 3 distinct flavors to enjoy each of the maps in, and generally if you go into a hunt with the condition in one way, it's going to be that way for the majority if not the entirety of the hunt. The dynamic nature will be more visible when you're just out open exploring, and that brings with it a special charm for just chilling out and hunting whatever you run across with you and your friends or just simply alone. The third thing I was concerned about was how much focus mode would be shoved down your throat. It's very well implemented, and depending on the weapon you choose and the playstyle you personally want to go for, you can interact with it a lot or only on occasion when you want to bust open a weak spot for damage. Pleasantly surprised is how I'd put it. Again, with the difficulty being so lenient and so many viable options on the way to play or weapon choice, what is shaving 20 seconds off a hunt when you can just play in a way that you find more enjoyable? Don't over-optimize the fun out of the game. Even if you don't ever go into focus mode, you'll still be fine, because choosing not to do a finisher and pop the weak spot right away, that means that you'll have a longer period in which dealing increased damage to the weak spot, so in the end it really just comes down to player choice. I also didn't realize in the beta, but the monsters have an attack where they're left with a temporary weak spot. Like a Rathian, when she blows a fireball, will expose her tongue, and this limited time weak spot is there for the keen-eyed and well-timed hunter, and it felt really satisfying to identify these for each monster and exploit them. Weapon skills. I love what they did with the weapon skills. By taking each weapon and applying different innate skills on them, It really helps differentiate each end form of the weapon in the crafting list. Because attack boosting skills are only applicable to the weapon slots, it means that you can't have everything. There are trade-offs that you'll have to make, and that's great. It makes each choice more meaningful. I just pray in the eventual expansion that they don't add level 4 decorations, as it would make the weapon slots so powerful that you can pretty much put any skill you want, and that would take away from this meaningful choice. The best way to push more power into a set, the way that they have it, is with the charms, and they have a really good grocery list of items to hunt for in order to upgrade them, which is more than enough to keep you very busy trying to make and upgrade the ones that matter to you. Decorations can be melded so you're not left out of a skill for a certain playstyle, and decorations with bonus skills can be earned by hunting harder endgame encounters. Performance. I played on a GTX 4080 PC, which is an expensive setup, so I really can't comment on overall performance, but the game is certainly not light, and I expect that they'll find ways to optimize it post-launch if not by day one. And if you are concerned, consoles are usually a really sure bet to get a great experience, or you can even try the free PC benchmark to make that determination if PC is the route for you. I had a great time in 4K DLSS on quality mode with ray tracing on high, and I did not use frame generation. I did have dips, but the game does give you a fair amount of toggles that you can mess with to sort of tune your experience, and I'm sure somebody will test them all in depth and come up with some really good optimization settings. Overall feelings. I can't go into more detail without spoilers, but I found the game to be super cozy and fun to play. It reminded me of the difficulty of Monster Hunter Portable 3rd, which is a game that didn't get localized to the West. When things are not too hard, but the monsters are still dynamic enough to make you feel really good when you pull stuff off, for me it leads to more experimentation, less caring about over-optimization of your gear, less concern about what's meta, and it's really just a fun time to hunt and explore. The maps are all incredibly memorable, the states that they are in are unique, and while the roster is smaller than I had hoped, the quality of what we do have is fantastic. They streamlined a lot of friction out of the game, so if you know that before jumping in, then I think you'll have a great time. The DLC monsters and eventual expansion will no doubt give us the difficulty that we crave, and I can say confidently that this game creates a foundation so solid that one day it might very well become the best Monster Hunter game to date, but time will tell. In the meantime, how they plan to flesh out the endgame, expand the roster with free updates, and how they can address some of the glaring omissions that I'll cover in my spoiler review will become key to the overall experience. Seasoned players will see their mileage vary depending on how many weapons you play, how much you like to play without the need for a grind and just for the sake of fun, but for newer hunters, Wilds will no doubt be a fabulous entry with more than enough content to carry them from start to finish without ever feeling like it's light. How the game is as a multiplayer story experience is something that I'll find out as I start my new and forever save when I play this game at launch with my daughter. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this audio focused review. I thought the game was great. There's certainly some shortcomings, but overall the content quality is very high, and I can't wait to see how they expand on the game post-launch. I'll do a spoiler review probably maybe in like a week or two. I'll give it some time. And of course I will label it justly so those of you who don't want to know about the monsters or even the endgame mechanics can just skip that video until you're feeling comfortable. Hope you guys enjoyed this early review, and until next time, happy hunting.